Welcome back to your live continuing NAB 2015 Teradek coverage. I'm Michael Artis. We're coming to you live from the Las Vegas Convention Center, Las Vegas, Nevada. This is the National Association of Broadcasters Convention. Thank you so much for joining us. I've got my good friend Paul McNiff here from Canon.
Good to see you, Mike.
USA. It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Paul, you guys have so many announcements this year leading up to NAB. First of all, let's talk about the XC10. There are a lot of people who have, including myself, who said, I don't know where this camera fits exactly, but I love that it shoots 4K on board. I certainly can tell you where I think it fits. It could be a perfect crash cam. It could be great for drones, and I'm not talking about the little like DJI and the 3D robotic stuff. I'm talking about the bigger octocopters and stuff. Where does Canon see this camera fitting?
Well, it's a really small camera, so it fits almost everywhere, like literally, physically. It's very, very small. It's very lightweight, so it actually does fit on some of the smaller drones, not the ones that really require an incredibly small camera.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about the camera, the specs. It's got a 1-inch sensor, so it kind of fits into a little bit of a strange place. You know, it's not 2/3, and it's not quite Super 35, but it does shoot 4K, shoots 422 4K in 8-bit in our new H.264 codec, which we call XF AVC, and it shoots to CFast cards.
And so the 1-inch sensor confused a lot of people. It's not an APS-C sensor.
No.
It's a 1-inch sensor, and it's not a full frame sensor. This camera is for a lot of different applications, but the one thing to note, I think, is that it's got a fixed 10 times zoom lens.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, it's 24 to 240 millimeters. In terms of what its field of view is.
And it's taking the LPE6 batteries, which I think is nice. So it kind of fits in the family. You can kind of have your 5D Mark III, you can have your C300 Mark II, which we're going to get to in a minute, and you can have this, and you've got a nice family of cameras.
Yeah, and it also, in terms of taking still images, it has a mechanical shutter, so it's a really, really good still camera. Whereas you can usually on smaller, and I will use the term consumer camera to describe it, but loosely and maybe cautiously.
Yeah.
Usually on that kind of a video camera, you can take stills, but it's not with a mechanical shutter.
I feel like, in my mind, I see where you're saying, I feel like it's a prosumer device, but maybe you can use it in higher end stuff because, again, it could be a great crash cam and stuff like that. If you want interchangeable lenses, if you want a larger sensor, if you want other features and maybe even more dynamic range, you want to go up to the C300 Mark II.
That's true. The C300 Mark II does have a lot more dynamic range. It's got higher bit rate, the ability to output RAW. But the C300 Mark II is now our first Super 35 Cinema EOS line. So that's actually part of the Cinema EOS line, whereas the XC10 is not considered Cinema EOS.
Right. To me, it's more. Yeah, it's more in the DSLR world. It's kind of like a little crossover.
It kind of is. It's a new place. It's a new spot in the lineup completely.
Yeah. And so the C300 Mark II, it just, to me, it seems amazing because I know one thing. We have a C500, and all we've been saying is, can't we record on board 4K? Why not? And we have to go to a Convergent Design or a Shogun or something like that, an Odyssey Q7. And it'd be nice to be able to record 4K on board. Now we can do that.
Now you can do that, and you have a lot more dynamic range.
Right.
So 15 stops of dynamic range, as well as an ISO that goes up to over 102,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, one of the great things about it, I'm not going to tell you there's no noise at 102,000.
Of course there's going to be some noise.
But what I will say is, because of some of it's a brand new sensor.
Sure.
So it's a newly engineered sensor. It's got some physical changes as well as some different processing capability in the camera that help keep the noise reduced when you are shooting at higher ISOs. And one of the other things we did, we kind of went towards what's been the standard across the industry in a lot of places, and we made the optimal base ISO for that camera 800, as opposed to where on the 300 and the 500 had been 850.
Right, and I think that is a good move because it falls in line. It kind of sets a standard, right?
Yeah, and it's also something you can set on a light meter.
Right. Which is very important. And that's the thing. I don't know that people should be shooting at 102,000 ISO. I feel like you should light things right and not have to shoot in terribly, terribly dark situations.
Well, it really depends on exactly what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, we're very, very good at low light, and we're very good at, because of the way that our sensor operates, we're very good at keeping the noise low at higher ISOs. if we design these cameras largely for people that are in the cinema world, either to be an A camera or even to, in a lot of cases, be a B camera, and I think this is a camera that can fall into both positions. But there's so many other people that are shooting in so many different situations. We think of this traditional cinematic kind of film shooting or television, but not everybody who's purchasing these cameras, especially nowadays, is doing narrative work, so they don't always have the opportunity. You have military customers, government, law enforcement, lots of people who may not have, to us, what's perceived as they have the need for 4K, but the need to zoom in to be able to see things in the dark.
Well, that's one of the things for 4K. I know you worked on the World Baseball Classic.
I did.
You guys were doing you were using the C500, giving them 4K, which they were not broadcasting in, but they were using it to crop in for replays.
That's correct, yeah. That was some of the tests that they were doing on the MLB network during that. We were using the C500. We were outputting 60p from that into the truck where they had the Evertz Dreamcatcher at 4K, which allows them to take the 4K image and then they can zoom in far more than just into the HD area. But if you zoom in, you have that quadrant that you could take out and get full HD.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I got to see some of that work, and it was spectacular. I like it. So the C500 is a great camera, but my one drawback, or my two drawbacks, were you couldn't record 4K on board, and I thought the dynamic range wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and the low light wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and now you fixed that with the C300 Mark II.
The low light was really good on the 500.
Please, the cameras, we love it. We think it's amazing. I'm just saying, I thought it could have been a little bit better, but here you fixed it on the C300 Mark II, and I love that. And I'm telling you, I'm being super picky with that because you know what
everybody
I think
is. It's NAB. I'm used to that.
But what I think of is that, when we started in the business, you'd use an ENG rig, let's say, and pump the gain up too high, and and if you had to in low light, right? And that would be so grainy, it was awful. But the viewers would still accept that. And so now what we say as too grainy is not even, it's so. The grain is so minimal at 102,000 ISO, it's ridiculous.
Since the 5D Mark II came out, only is 25,000 ISO not good enough for people.
Right, exactly.
And when that came out, it was madness.
Right. So what else has Canon got going on here?
Well, let's see, we've got a few things. One of the big things at the show is there's a lot of talk about ACES, the Academy Color Encoding Specification. We've partnered very closely with the Academy, so we have a lot of things that work in conjunction with that. We've got a lot of color spaces on our cameras and on our 4K reference displays. So we had a 4K reference display, now we have a new one. It's 24 inches, it's designed specifically for on-set use, for doing on-set color correction and color grading, which is really a big part of what the ACES system is all about.
And I love that it's happening on set, because then you can go, you know if the lighting's a little off or this is a little off, and you can get the feel. You're not baking it in. You're then going to give it to a colorist later, but at least you can give the colorist some information like this is kind of what we wanted or what we were going for.
The way that it works, when you have a reference display like we have that works according to these specifications, and you also have a camera like our cameras that can output what's called the ACES proxy, which means that what you're seeing on that display is going to match as closely as possible what you would see in the DI suite when you actually go back to do that. So you have the ability to, while you're on set, have your DIT working with your director and with your DP, and they come out with, this is the look that we're going to start with. And so then when they go in to do their finishing, that's when, hey, look, everything looks exactly the way that we made it look on set. And on set, you're probably recording something like RAW. You're not baking in all of that information, but you can make either a LUT or a CDL, which is a color decision list, which is another part of the entire ACES system.
Going back to the C300 Mark II for a second, I'm really impressed with this camera because I think it has so many different applications. You have documentaries, you've got filmmaking, you've got television. It really seems to fit almost everywhere. Can you talk about the fact that this camera, it seems to me like it's like in the middle. It's not, I'm sure that there'll eventually be a new C500, but the C500 is still an amazing camera and a workhorse. You've got the C300 and you've got the C100 Mark II as well. But this is kind of like the perfect, I think, all-around camera. It kind of feels like to me it can really reach up to do really high-end jobs and kind of reach down. And can we talk about the different frame rates you have in the camera for 4K?
Well, it only goes up to 30p for 4K, so
Okay.
you've still got advantages in the C500.
Yep.
While you can't record those on board, you can output up to 120 if you do our half raw
Sure.
from the C500. So the C500 still has a very, very strong place as the top of the line unit.
Absolutely. It's the flagship.
Right.
Yes.
So the C300 Mark II does kind of fit in an interesting place. We still have the C300, so we haven't replaced that with the C300 Mark II. Some people have even said, you maybe should have given it a different name because it's kind of a unique beast. And we even still have the C100. A lot of people, because we have the C100 Mark II, we still have the C100, so we have a full line of cinema EOS cameras.
And what I like about that is there are price points for everybody.
True, yes, and a lot of the price points have come down really far recently.
Right, and so because of that, all these guys who started with DSLRs can now move up, and that's what I've been talking about all day, I think, is that that's how the industry seems to be shifting, is driving everybody higher, not necessarily dollar-wise. They are achieving more. It's challenging people, and it's giving them the tools to step up, and I think that's really what the DSLR whole movement has done.
Yeah.
Is it kind of democratized the whole industry for a minute and then pushed everybody to achieve better quality, and that's what it's doing.
That's absolutely what it did, and I remember back when we released the 5D Mark II, and that NAB, there was a lot of people saying there's only 3 things people care about this NAB: 3D, 5D, and 7D. And the 5D and the 7D have hung on, and really they disrupted the industry and they pushed everything further along. So there's mirrorless cameras, there's SLRs, and there's a lot of different large sensor options. But then what used to be kind of the camcorder market, that prosumer sort of 1/3 or even half-inch, has now become Super 35 or similar. Changed the entire industry.
It really has, and you guys have been the leader in this stuff for so long with the XL1S and moving up all the way through all this stuff. I really love it, and I love what you guys are doing and what you have out there. Obviously, the 5D Mark III, an amazing camera, still out there.
Absolutely.
You've got the whole DSLR line that's great.
7D Mark II.
And I think that a lot of these cameras work so well together, especially when you start buying into the lenses and you have all the great lenses and glass, and you can go between them. It really is just a great system.
You talk about working together. I'm going to segue back into talking about the C300 Mark II. A lot of the things that happen, especially the way things are, since things have moved away from film largely and into digital, there's a lot of matching of cameras, taking things like SLRs and smaller cameras like the C300, the C500, 300 Mark II, and then matching them over to other cameras. We now have different matrix settings that when you combine them with other color settings in the camera, like for example our new Canon C-Log 2, which is a newer gamma curve that it offers more extent, pretty much enables the 15 stops of dynamic range. We have matrix settings that allow you to match specifically to, I'm going to match the C300 Mark II to SLR video, so I want it to look like that EOS saturation, to allow you to match it to an Alexa, which was very commonly being done with the C300. It was very often a B camera, even though it was only an 8-bit camera.
Right.
And speaking of bit depth and color depth, one of the really great things, there's a lot of buzz about 4K, but there's a lot of people that don't really need 4K. You can do 2K in 12-bit. Which is exponentially more color.
Wow.
And color information is something that you can never, ever fake.
Right. No, absolutely. I didn't realize that you could do that. That's tremendous.
That's on board in the C300 Mark II.
Wow. And you can also obviously shoot full HD 1920 by 1080.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. I think that is amazing. I'm really excited about this camera.
Oh yeah.
I think it's just like I said, I think it's like the perfect camera because if you can only have one camera for most of your jobs, this is the camera that can get you through almost everything.
Yeah, it's a great thing. One of the other features that I want to talk about, because we're talking about where does it fit and who uses it. There's a lot of people that want to use autofocus, and so we've got the dual pixel autofocus that we introduced on some previous cameras.
Right.
100 Mark II, the C300, and now it has a lot more capabilities. So it'll have the face detection capability with far more lenses than were previously available. But when you get into the higher end, you have ACs whose their job is to follow focus.
Right.
They have no interest in using an autofocus feature. It's not appropriate for their kind of work. So we've taken that technology, and instead of causing it to run the lens and do the focus for you, it actually is just a focus assist, and it can tell you, it'll turn green when your subject is in focus, or it'll turn white with arrows pointing in up or down, depending if you are in front of or behind where your focus mark is supposed to be.
So it's a completely revolutionary way to assist focus. It's not done. Is it done through edging? because a lot of companies have this focus assist that's done through edging, and it's much more of a guide than it is something you can trust.
This is absolutely something that you can trust because it's taking the dual pixel autofocus, and instead of running the focus, it is just showing you where it should be.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love this. I really like it because I always talk about I don't want autofocus. I only see very, very limited applications for autofocus. Yes, I'm under a bridge hanging upside down and I can't possibly do this. All right, we'll go with it and we'll spray and pray. We'll hope that it's in focus. But this is tremendous. So I think it's good to have the ability to do autofocus, but I like this amazing focus assist. What do we call it? I remember I saw it the other day when I was reading about it. I lost the name.
It's dual pixel autofocus. It's the focus assist feature.
It's the focus assist feature for it.
The thing about it is that in 4K, because the resolution is so high, critical focus is so much more important. And when you miss it, that's you're gonna know that you missed it.
Even in DSLRs, we started to notice that because of the shallow depth of field. If something was slightly out of focus, boom, it was really out of focus.
Well, that was people went a little bit overboard with when you have a full frame sensor like on an SLR. That's about twice the size of a Super 35, which has been roughly the cinema standard for decades.
We'd have the tip of your nose in focus and the rest of your face blurred out.
People shooting with an 85 1.2 lens that's not designed for that kind of focus, and they were shooting at 1.2.
Yeah, it's interesting. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It's so glad to have you here. Honored to have you on set. And there's nobody who knows more than you about the technical specs of these cameras.
Well,
maybe somebody, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
And I love talking to you. Thank you so much.
I love to see you. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
We'll be back with a whole lot more live coverage of NAB 2015, your live continuing Teradek coverage. Right after this, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere.